Today we're looking at 2022 NBA offseason trades that must happen. Based on what we've seen this season, there's enough evidence to believe that these trades are essential to either these players getting better or these teams getting better. So let's go. So first off, it's clear now that the Utah Jazz have to do something. And that's either trading Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell, because the two have no chemistry together. They've been one of the best regular season teams for years, but have had 3 first-round exits in 5 seasons. So of course trading Rudy should be the first option, and there's some good moves to be made here that would really help both teams involved. Like by sending him to the Atlanta Hawks in a deal based around Clint Capella, John Collins or Onyeka Okongwu, and a first-round pick. The Jazz should try and get John Collins in the deal, and the Hawks should try to not give him up, but either way this deal gives the Utah Jazz a new look. Not so much of an emphasis at center, but it speeds the team up, gives them another real big man in the front court instead of it being Bogdanovich, and a more quick and easy offense. While for the Atlanta Hawks, they've struggled bad on the defensive end, and they have a lot of depth in the front court, so if they could trade some of it and land Gobert, he would completely transform this team. Plus, the pairing of himself and Trae Young would dominate. Trae would throw him a ton of lobs, and Rudy would make up for his lacking defense. Like I said, I'd want them to try and keep John Collins to help spread the floor for Rudy, but if they had to do it, I think they should let him walk, because this Hawks team needs to do something. Another trade that I love is sending Gobert to the Raptors for OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., and a first-round pick. For the Jazz, it would let them replace Royce O'Neal in the starting lineup with a young OG that's only getting better and looking more Kawhi-like every day. He'd help them out way more on offense than Royce can. The draft pick would be a good trade asset, and Gary Trent Jr. would be another 18-point-per-game scorer for them off the bench. So the firepower of him and Jordan Clarkson together would be a sight to see. While for the Raptors, well, they're playing small now, and they got smashed by Philly and Joel Embiid because of it. So if they want to switch it up, I think Rudy Gobert would allow them to play a lot more of a traditional starting 5, and he'd pair really well with the rest of the starting lineup. The Mavs could really use Gobert too, and pairing him with Luka Doncic would be a game changer. Dwight Powell, Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Green, and 2 firsts would be their best bet, but I don't see that being enough. Now if they went the other route and for some reason wanted to trade Donovan Mitchell, which of course they shouldn't, but even if they did, they might not be able to, because there's only really 3 scenarios, and I don't think any of them work for them. A trade to the Hawks wouldn't work because 6'1" Trae Young and 6'1" Donovan Mitchell in the backcourt on defense would be a bust. A trade to the Pelicans for CJ McCollum and 2 to 3 first-round picks came up, but I doubt Utah wants to age up like that for someone who's never been an all-star. And the popular trade to the Knicks for RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, and a pick wouldn't really happen because I don't think New York would trade RJ Barrett right now for anyone. So Utah's best bet is on trading Rudy Gobert. Now what was clear this postseason, at least to me, is that D'Angelo Russell needs to be traded. In that game 6 against Memphis, Russell got benched the whole 4th quarter because the Wolves were playing so much better without him, and apparently that got him upset, but they were actually that much worse with him on the court, so he can't be mad. So if the Wolves now want to take their team to the next level, they need to trade him. And there was 2 scenarios I found. The Clippers starting point guard right now is still Reggie Jackson, who is great, but he'd be just as good off the bench. So maybe instead send D'Angelo there for Norman Powell, who could start, Marcus Morris, who honestly would also start, and maybe a draft pick. And this Wolves team is now looking very different. While for the Clippers, they have the depth to give up and could use a point guard to run the show. And if not that, then I like the deal of D'Angelo Russell for Malcolm Brogdon and TJ McConnell. Brogdon doesn't get as much respect as he deserves, but this is a good deal. Brogdon put up just about the same numbers that D'Angelo did last year. And for the Pacers, it helps them age down. For the Wolves, they do age up, but get a little more depth and experience on the team. But speaking of the Pacers, if this isn't the right trade between them and the Wolves, I would love to see one made where they get Buddy Hield in exchange for Malik Beasley, Josh Okogie, and Jordan McLaughlin. And in it, the Pacers get 3 young players that have some potential in exchange for a player that they pretty much got for free from Sacramento. And apparently the Kings had a hard time trading Buddy or something, which is why it took so long for it to happen. But if that is the case, then this is a good deal for Indiana. While for the Wolves, of course, putting another shooter in the starting lineup is exactly what they need. And while we're on the topic of the Pacers, I'm not even going to mention any Miles Turner trades because I'm tired of talking about them and then they still don't happen. There is another Malcolm Brogdon trade that I could see happening this offseason, and that would be the Pacers sending him to Washington in return for Kyle Kuzma and Rui Hachimura. The Wizards need a point guard and the Pacers need to trade Malcolm, so it just works out. Plus, I think he'd be a great fit alongside Bradley Beal, better than Spencer Dinwiddie or Russell Westbrook were. His style just really complements a good scorer. As for the actual trade, Washington might be giving up a little much, but this just seems like a deal they would make, so I had to include it. Of course though, I think we can all agree that the Russell Westbrook for John Wall trade needs to happen, and if the Lakers were smart, they'd find a way to bring Eric Gordon in on that deal as well. And I don't even need to get into the reasonings here. But speaking of lost point guards, it's also very clear that the Portland Trailblazers need to do something quick to keep Damian Lillard happy. And I think the match made in heaven is to trade Eric Bledsoe, Keon Johnson, and the 7th overall pick this year for Jeremy Grant. Detroit gets a former 1st-round pick and the 7th pick in this year's draft that Portland has no use for, while in exchange the Blazers would get Jeremy Grant, who's good on offense, great on defense, and gives the Blazers a great base to start building a playoff team around again. Now DeJounte Murray was a guy that became a 1st first-time All-Star this year, and considering the fact that he's an elite defender and now scoring over 20 a game on offense, means that he's got a lot of trade value. So I could see a team like the Raptors trying to make a trade for DeJounte Murray and Jakob Poeltl in exchange for Gary Trent Jr., Precious Achiuwa, Kim Birch, and 2 firsts. For the Raptors, DeJounte pairs well with Van Fleet in the backcourt, and I mentioned earlier that they could use a defensive rim protector like Poeltl in the starting lineup. While for the Spurs, they get a young up-and-comer in Gary Trent and still get 2 firsts for the future since they're not anywhere close to being a great team just yet. Personally, I don't really see them trading DeJounte, but if they did, I could see it being for a deal like this. For a while now, the Charlotte Hornets have needed a center, and I know it's not the perfect scenario for them, but I just feel like I can see Christian Wood winding up on the Hornets. I just feel like something like this is gonna happen, so I think they trade maybe James Bouknight and PJ Washington for Christian Wood. The only problem is that Christian isn't completely the defender they'd be looking for, but he's manageable on that end, and his offense could fit in really well there, while at the same time it could help Charlotte with their salary issues. While the gamble of 2 very young players with potential is one that Houston should be looking for. The Miami Heat might want to start looking into trading Duncan Robinson, seeing how he's pretty much fallen completely out of their rotation in the playoffs and isn't necessarily a great fit with their new team dynamic at the moment. And I think a good move could be one to the Sacramento Kings. Okay, hear me out. Do a sign and trade involving Dante DiVincenzo, Jeremy Lamb, and a draft pick, but this is a good deal because Sacramento needs more shooting to go along with De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. And since Dante's a great defender that can shoot pretty well, he'd be a good replacement into Miami's system. Plus, DiVincenzo's already said that he's not happy on the Kings anyways, so this one could work. Earlier, we spoke about D'Angelo Russell's shortcomings over these past playoffs, but we didn't mention what Karl Anthony Towns went through and how inconsistent he was during it. There were a few games in that Grizzlies series where he just didn't show up. He had a game with 8 points and another one with 15, but he only shot 7 times that game. And for a guy that's supposed to be your best player, that can't happen. Maybe trading him to the Cleveland Cavaliers would be good. He'd fit right in with their team, and in a deal of Jared Allen, Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, and a first-round pick or 2 for Towns, it sounds pretty good. For Cleveland, it frees them up of having so many big men, and Towns could play alongside Evan Mobley, and the two would complement each other on both ends. Plus, Colin Sexton probably won't be with the team anyways next year, so they're okay with trading him. While for the Wolves, they do lose their star, but possibly get 3 new members to their starting lineup. And if we learned anything from Minnesota this year, it's that Anthony Edwards is gonna be their superstar. But speaking of that, I don't love Sexton and Anthony Edwards in the backcourt together, so it's not the perfect deal, but something like this has potential. And if not there, Karl Anthony Towns could find his way to a team like the Knicks. Of course, it won't happen because it never does with the Knicks, but if they traded a first-round pick, Julius Randle, Kemba Walker, and Nerlens Noel for him, again, this gives them 3 new members to their starting lineup. Kemba Walker a chance at redemption, probably same for Julius Randle, seeing how his past couple of years has gone, and Towns would give New York some kind of hope that they probably really need right now. Not the perfect deal, but I think it was a good enough one to deserve a mention. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.